Hey, this is Andrew Grievous from 25yearslatersite.com, and long before David Lynch and Mark Frost asked us to keep the mystery alive, Wrapped in Plastic magazine asked us to keep the conversation alive. Would we be where we're at today in terms of having as many wonderful podcasts, having all the social media interactions, having websites like my own, if we had not previously had the work that Craig Miller and John Thorne put out for over a decade? They were the ones that inspired us to look at Twin Peaks as a work of art that needed to be studied the way that so many of us do today. Without that work, what would the summer of 2017 have been like? Would we have had the amazing conversations and the quality content that we had to listen to and read on a daily basis had they not paved the way? I don't know. It's a question I don't really want to think about. I know for me personally, the work that they did in Wrapped in Plastic magazine, particularly in regards to Fire Walk With Me, opened my mind in ways that I had never really thought about art before. And that translated to me wanting to start the website that I have today. And I've said that numerous times, that I would not be doing what I'm doing without the work that they did. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you so much to John Thorne, Craig Miller. I never had the pleasure of getting to talk to you, but your work is definitely appreciated as well. Thank you both.
The sycamore trees in the dark trees that blow in the dark trees that blow.
And welcome to Twin Peaks Unwrapped. I'm your host, Ben Durant, and beside me is
Brian Kazaska.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Ben.
We've got a special show today.
And what a special show it is.
Yes.
It's very special.
We are going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of Wrapped in Plastic magazine. We're going to get John Thorne on the show. And I think this is really a tribute to John Thorne as well. It's not just about Wrapped in Plastic. It's about the man, the myth, the legend.
The godfather of Twin Peaks.
John Thorne.
Hi, this is Maya McBriar. I just wanted to say congratulations to John Thorne on the 25th anniversary of Wrapped in Plastic. What an amazing accomplishment. Your terrific writing and insight has been invaluable to the Twin Peaks community. Thank you for keeping the spirit alive. And cheers to the next 25 years.
All right, we are on the phone with John Thorne, the legend, the godfather. Hey, John.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good. So this month is the 25th anniversary of Wrapped in Plastic. How does it feel to, have, been 25 years ago that you started this magazine with Craig?
It's hard to believe. I mean, that it's been that long. I've been going through old files and bringing back a lot of old memories to me and how it was when we first started. I never thought I'd be talking about it 25 years later, let alone that there would be new Twin Peaks to talk about as well. So, I mean, it's really, really remarkable.
You've recently put a post up. You've been updating your blog, and one of them was about the naming of Wrapped in Plastic. Can you share that with us a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I did put up a blog post, and I'm going to do that all month. I'm going to put up a few little things. It's really almost, for me, more than anything else, there may be a few people out there who might be interested in the some of the things that happened to us as we did the magazine. And so this last one that I put up was really about the beginning of how we got started and what we were doing. And Craig had come up to me at a convention and said, "Let's do a Twin Peaks magazine." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." I had no idea what I was going to do or how we were going to do it. I was really basically just a kid, essentially. And, of course, the first thing I did is like, yeah, come up with a name. And I sat down and thought, oh, what are some cool names? Craig wanted to call it something like the Twin Peaks magazine or something like that. He wanted to put Twin Peaks in the title, but we couldn't get the licensing for that. It was too expensive. So we tried to come up. And I just wrote a list. I wrote a list of possible names, and Wrapped in Plastic was on that list. And when I suggested that to Craig, I went through the names with him, and he thought that was a great name too. So that's the one we went with.
Yeah, some of them are like Owl Cave, Wow Bob Wow,
Pine Weasel.
the Pine Weasel.
The Pine Weasel. I like that
Pine
one.
Weasel. Right. We honestly, the trick was, how do we make the magazine identifiable as a Twin Peaks magazine without saying this is a Twin Peaks magazine? Because again, we didn't want to infringe on copyright. We didn't want to get in any kind of trouble. So what are some things that people would, that would recognize from Twin Peaks? Yeah, Owl Cave, the double R, things like that. But Wrapped in Plastic had a kind of an odd curiosity factor to it.
And on your list here, it was like fifth down or so. So I don't know if you're as you're thinking, you're writing it down. So by the fifth time, you struck gold here.
I don't know. The first things that popped into my head, like, what's a Twin Peaks reference? And of course, all that list was made before Fire Walk With Me came out. So that list was made in 1991, and there was no, Owl Cave Ring or Blue Rose, which might have been, if we waited a year, it might have been called the Blue Rose. So,
Blue Rose magazine,
there was nothing to pull from Fire Walk With Me. It was just from the show that we had.
Hey, this is Mark Gibbons from Deer Meadow Radio. This is for John Thorne in celebration of his and Craig Miller's Wrapped in Plastic 25th anniversary. I have, I think, all but one of these issues that I've tracked down over the years. Most of them bought at the time. Don't fool around. Get John's book. If you want the whole picture, just track these things down. It's worth the effort. I grew up with these things. They kept the fire burning. My podcast is in many ways, trying to reincarnate what these guys did back in the day. So congratulations, I guess, John. 25 years later, you're reaping the benefits, and can't say enough how much, Wrapped in Plastic. I'm looking there right now, and they're there in my box. I probably have an issue out that I was looking into to build off, another episode of Deer Meadow Radio. So congratulations again, John.
I think you may have shared this with me before, but so I got Wrapped in Plastic, the magazine, probably when it first came out. Like I got a lot of things like the pick cards and stuff, and you must have been doing something to maybe get a distribution list or something, because I think you guys found me, and then I had to get the magazine right away.
Wow.
Had you sent in to Star Picks cards?
Yes.
Is that what? Yeah,
that's what I did. Yes.
Yeah. That was a big deal for us because we were going into comic book stores, and basically that was it. I mean, that was the only outlet for us at the time. But then Craig had contacted Star Picks, and Star Picks, I forget how the deal went down, but we got the Star Picks mailing list, essentially. Everyone who had ordered Star Picks cards, they gave us, or we somehow made an exchange maybe for an ad or something. They gave us the names and addresses of everyone who had ever sent something in to them.
That's great.
And so we just sent a flyer out to everyone.
Yeah.
We printed up flyers and we mailed them out to everyone who'd ordered something from Star Picks. And that was a big help.
Yeah, I loved it. And it was just something so cool. Bi-monthly, every 2 months or so, I'd get an issue of Wrapped in Plastic.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It was a good deal for us.
And you guys really evolved over. I mean, like, I don't know if you want to get into that, where you started with first issue, and that was, the cover was even just 2 colors, really.
Right.
And then it evolved, and it was Craig's had drawings that he would do, and then it eventually got into photos. Can you share about the evolution of the magazine?
Yeah, and again, a lot of that is because we didn't know much, and we were afraid to some extent of what we could do without getting in any kind of trouble. So we didn't know if we put a picture on the cover right away whether or not we would be in any way infringing on copyright. So Craig drew the first 6 covers are all, he just drew them, and they kind of look like comic book covers. And because again, we just thought, well, that's safe. But I think issue 7 was the first photo, I think.
Oh, wow.
I think so. And that was Julie Cruz on the cover, and that just was really, really cool. And then from there on, we started doing a lot more photos, and we realized what we were essentially allowed to do. And the covers got much better. The printing process got much better. The interior page quality got much better. It became really a legitimate magazine as it went along. It felt like a magazine. It looked like a magazine. But when it started out, it was kind of like essentially like a fanzine.
Yeah.
It was like a comic book almost.
Wow. Now, I don't know why I did this, but I brought my whole collection of wrapped in plastic to the studio.
He has like a luggage bag.
Yeah, I have a
it's
luggage
heavy.
Okay.
I'm not sure why I did that. I was like, I kept thinking, maybe during lunch I want to look at these more. But it's just like, it's an amazing collection. Tell us about, I think it was Catherine Coulson that was your first celebrity guest. Is that right? That celebrity interview?
Yeah, we had done another interview that the author and humorist Joe Bob Briggs. That was in issue 2. And that was something that Craig had already lined up for another magazine. And it was like, we'd already promised it. And so we felt an obligation to do that. But yes, Catherine Coulson was the first actor from the show or person associated with the show we got an interview with. It was around the time that the Bravo reruns were coming on. And for people who don't know, the Bravo TV network had purchased Twin Peaks. They were going to replay it. I think they had a theme they were doing, which TV Too Good for TV or something like that. And David Lynch, of course, assembled, these Log Lady introductions. He wrote and filmed these little pieces, all about them, there in front of every episode. This was all brand new Twin Peaks. And so we contacted Bravo and said, we'll promote this. Can we get an interview? And somehow that's the path that got us to Catherine Coulson.
Wow.
And I think we ended up interviewing her more than almost anyone else. Over the course of the 75 issues, we interviewed her at least 4 times. Found a letter. I'm going to put it up on the blog at some point. I found a handwritten letter by Catherine Coulson to us where she just said, I love this magazine and I love the way you did the interview and I can't wait to meet you guys. And I mean, she didn't have to do that, but she did. And so that was really cool.
That's something else.
Nice.
Yeah, she seemed to really be so supportive of the magazine. And I remember,
the whole fan community. She would, at the festivals and everything. She really was a great person.
Yeah. And I think we've mentioned before that was our first actor from the show, right? I mean, to get her on there too. And,
cool.
And it was the time that she was, ill, and we didn't know that.
Yeah.
And she gave us 10 minutes. She said, "I'll give you 10 minutes," and it's like, wow, that's really kind of you. And now, after the fact, to realize, wow, everything that she went through. I think about other people like Harley Payton. Like he was somebody. He seemed like he was really supportive too. Where he would like, I don't know if he would email you to correct you or to give you more information or.
The Harley Payton story's good, and I think I put some stuff already up about that. But just very, very quickly, he was in town shooting a movie, James Spader and Eric Stoltz, and we went on set to interview Harley, and we got to sit down in this huge mansion where they were shooting and talk to him face to face about Twin Peaks. And Eric Stoltz and James Spader sat in, and that was an interesting conversation. That's another story. But then after that, we were sending him whenever we could, if we could get an address for somebody who was involved with the show, we would always send them free copies of the magazine. And Harley read it. He read it and he would give us information. And I'm really glad he did because I made a huge mistake in an essay that I wrote. It's in the book. And I corrected it for the book because I found Harley's letter where he was like, this is kind of how it went down in the second season, and people forget, but this is important to remember. And I realized, that's very important. So he was a great person to have reading the magazine.
Harley Payton, producer and writer of Twin Peaks.
Funny because for me, Twin Peaks, it has been such an extraordinary journey, and now it's gone over decades. And the thing I think about Wrapped in Plastic generally, and John specifically, is just how much help it has been to have someone explain it to me. It's like he's really been there to unscramble it for all of us along the way. And all the in-depth interviews. And I used to read that magazine every time it came out. It was right at my door. And it was a wonderful sort of companion piece to it. And I think that that's relatively rare. And particularly when you think about when the show started, sort of pre-blog, pre-internet in a way, all that stuff, his contribution is enormous. And the fact that it continues today, I think, is just a great thing and something he certainly deserves. It's been wonderful to kind of watch that and actually be a part of the work that he's done along the way. Yeah, every once in a while I felt compelled to try to correct perceptions or whatever. But yeah, sure. It was nice to have that opportunity too. And again, it was so great to have this kind of entity that was out there that was kind of keeping track of things when it was easy to lose track. And so I think that's something that made John's contribution to it. And just, I think, generally to kind of the way people look at the show and understand the show and learn things that they might not have learned otherwise. It's enormous. I mean, I don't think you can understate it, really.
And, of course, you mentioned the book. Most people should know by now, The Essential Wrapped in Plastic,
Yep.
your book that really of took the essential stuff from Wrapped in Plastic magazine and put it into a book, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Do you have some favorite issues of Wrapped in Plastic magazine?
I do. I mean, there's so many issues that we had, and there's favorite moments, and there's favorite. I guess issue 60 is a favorite because that was the issue that I did the dream theory, and we published that, and then Craig did a really cool wraparound cover, so that the photo goes all the way around, to the backside.
I have that. I'm looking at that right now, and I never realized that this wrapped around. Harry Dean Stanton is there on the back, and then there's Cooper just looking out. But I didn't even realize until you said it.
It's one big photo.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's what we call a wraparound cover.
Yeah.
We did it. I think we only did it one other time. We did it. I think it's 39, where we had the Georgia Coffee poster with McLaughlin, and we essentially republished the poster and so if you open up the full magazine, you'll see the full poster goes around to the back. So I like doing stuff like that, and if we had really good content, then those are the issues that stand out. So like 56, where we had Naomi Watts' interview, where she was not very well known at the time, and she gave us so much time. We talked about Mulholland Drive, and that was just one of my favorite interviews. And that issue, it turns out, is one of the harder issues to get. I think it was a good, solid issue.
Yeah. I actually missed a few issues, and that was the hardest one to get.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. That's a tough one. We interviewed David Lynch a couple of times. That was fun. And then we also did an Eraserhead thing, and he designed the cover. David Lynch designed the cover to, I think it's issue 65. So if you open it up on the table of contents, it says front cover designed by David Lynch. He had asked to do it.
So
we're like, absolutely. You can design the cover if you want to do it. Whatever you want.
You can write an article. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, right. I don't think I've ever told this story before, but when Lost Highway came out, we got really, really close to a Trent Reznor interview. I mean, we were like on the precipice of the interview. I mean, and this publicist said, but he has to have the cover. And Craig being Craig was, I can't promise that. And it fell through. I don't know if that's the reason why.
Yeah.
But they insisted, if this goes through, he has to have the cover. I can't remember what the details were. It probably wouldn't have happened anyway. But we came very, very close to getting that. So
what's most memorable about some of your work is these essays that you put together. Of course, you talk about the dream essay you did, but there's also that famous Laura Palmer essay that you did, which I think is issue 71. That was incredible.
Yeah, it's another cool cover because that cover image comes from the movie trailer for Fire Walk with Me. Craig had purchased the actual 35 millimeter reel that they would show in the theaters of Fire Walk with Me. And of course, each one of those frames was kind of like a little slide. And I said to him, late in the trailer, there's this great shot of Laura. She's laying down and she's kind of smiling. And so he rolled the whole trailer out till he could get to that frame, and then we turned that into the cover. So that photo essentially, nowadays with digital, you could get any cover you want, but that was a rarity. It's like, we have a shot that no one else has.
Nice.
So, and I wrote a long essay about Fire Walk with Me in that issue.
Hey guys, it's Joel. John's great legacy has been the things he's written, and looking back on those from today's vantage point and getting a real sense of how to piece together Twin Peaks as something like a coherent story. Because I always appreciated it for the mystery. I appreciated the atmosphere and the mood. I said, well, not everything adds up. Everything's kind of messy, and that's okay. It's not really telling a linear story. And I still think there's a lot of truth to that. But at the same time, he kind of showed us a way to look at it and tease out these connections and these interesting patterns and the sort of larger meaning within that I think is really one of his most important innovations, and probably one of the things that people don't talk about quite as much, I think. So I've loved what he's done with that, especially with Fire Walk with Me, and I know a lot of people love the Dreams of Deer Meadow theory. For me, John's essay on Laura Palmer was really the key one, and it showed me a way to look at Fire Walk with Me where we weren't just experiencing her trauma and going through that to sort of the bitter end, but also finding this kind of transcendence. And it really pointed me to things that were already in the film itself and kind of put those together. So I think that's been hugely important. And I can't wait to see how he does that with the new material as well, and the discussions and arguments and agreements and just new discoveries that will come out of that. So thank you, John, and thank you at Twin Peaks Unwrapped for hosting this great tribute.
But and Craig wrote some great stuff too. I didn't publish any of that in the book because Craig wrote it and it's really his material. He wrote a great essay about Mulholland Drive and a great essay about Eraserhead. Those are great issues to read too.
I always loved it when you were able to get Mark Frost too. I mean, Green issue 9, the Invisible Man there with Mark Frost. But it was especially this issue. So for a couple of things, I think this is the one where he kind of goes into what could have happened with Twin Peaks, like what would have happened with the third season or something.
Yes,
and then also I won a contest. So I won the Wrapped in Plastic magazine contest, and I got a signed Mark Frost issue 9. So I still is probably one of my most treasured Twin Peaks things.
So I got to ask you, Ben, if you don't mind me asking you, you can cut this out if you don't want to ask. How old were you? That was coming out.
17 years old.
Okay, so I was going through.
No,
I'm going to read a letter. Can
no,
please.
Oh, you should read it. You should read it, John.
It's all my stuff is super extremely geeky.
You got to read it.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, you got to read it, John. You got to read it.
This is Wrapped in Plastic number 6, and there's a letter in here
that
I explain. I'm going to read the letter real quick. The letter goes, "Dear Whip, I need to clarify this thing about a monkey in Fire Walk with Me. Throughout the Twin Peaks series and movie, one point has always come up: the owls are not what they seem. The owls! It's not a monkey, but an owl close-up eating the cream corn. The owls are Bob and his followers." Blah, 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 it goes on.
I'm so delusional. That looks nothing like an owl. I mean, owl, but...
Right. It says, Sheriff Truman said to Cooper in episode 3 that there is some kind of darkness in the woods, and that takes many forms as spirit and owls. Hope you get the message. Ben Durant.
Wow.
Wow. Hope you get the message.
Gosh, that doesn't sound like me.
Hope you get the message.
Oh my gosh. That couldn't have been that tone. It must have been a nice, I hope you understand.
No, I know. I read it that way.
Wow. I was like, I won't read this magazine anymore if you don't understand that it's the owls.
Not the monkeys.
I was dying. I saw that the other day. I mean, I don't remember the letters, but I saw that and I was
like, why did you publish that? That guy is crazy.
That's great.
No, we love to get letters where people were taking us to task or people had a different opinion. Those were the best letters because, you can publish letters where people are like, I love what you did. It was great. I love this. I love that. But it would be great when you'd get a letter. And then Craig, of course, if there was a letter that went through a lot of points that said, this, I disagree with this. I disagree with this theory. Craig would write like a full, 2-page response. Well,
wow.
On point 3, you said this, but we think that. And then he really liked that dialogue and that back and forth. We encouraged that. We didn't care if people disagreed. And I hope you take my mocking of your letter in the
right. No. I mock it myself.
I was just joking around.
I think it's funny because you look back on it and say, what were you thinking? It's clearly a monkey. But
you were young.
You were young.
Right. Yeah. And I think all of us were sometimes looking at things and I'm trying to make sense of it. Why would a monkey fit into this?
We still don't know why there was a monkey.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
I mean,
there was no monkey in the return. So
right.
Yeah. Judy wasn't a monkey. There was no monkey.
There should have been a monkey somewhere.
Yeah.
But.
I even think about even the return that was there's no owls. We were talking about this. There's an owl flying by when Dougie first comes to the house, and then there's some images like owl cookie jar in the Jones' house, but there really wasn't any mention of the owls.
Yeah, and
it seemed like they did one mention of every one of the famous identifying elements of the original series. So they had one damn good coffee. And they had one cherry pie. I don't think we saw donuts very often. We saw them maybe once or twice.
Chad got one for when he's getting the envelope and stuff. But
and then we had at one time the owl flew by. They wanted to acknowledge all that old stuff, but they didn't want to dwell on it. They wanted to move on.
So what was it like for you guys to get Mark Frost? And then not only did you get him for that issue, but later on you'd get him again, and he'd come back for other things that he was working on. You guys get to interview him.
The first time was, we were just thrilled. He had his book out, The List of Seven, and we said, hey, we're definitely going to promote that book. And we both read the book and took notes, and we were ready for that interview. But then we asked him too if he wouldn't mind talking about Twin Peaks, and he said fine. And so, but we were nervous because it was so close, and people might not realize this now, but we were so close to Twin Peaks. It had only been off the air for 2 years or so, and it didn't end well. And the film didn't get the best reviews at the time. The film was considered really a big flop. And so we felt that there were people who might not really want to dwell on the past. Twin Peaks seemed kind of like a failure at that time. While it had a strong fan base, we were careful. We didn't want to ask a lot of questions because we thought, well, maybe he doesn't want to talk too much. He was very free with his time and gave us a lot of good answers. Still, there was that sense of like, well, he wants to talk about new stuff. And that changed as time went along. As time went on, and we kind of got a relationship with him. We always promoted whatever project, whether it was a book or a film or a new show. I think he enjoyed talking to us, and so we got him to open up a little more, or at least he felt more comfortable talking to us. And we talked more Twin Peaks later. I met him about a year ago in Austin, and he was finishing his book tour, and I hadn't talked to him in a decade, and I hadn't actually physically seen him in much longer than that. And I went up to him, and he was very generous with his time. He actually said, come back here and let's sit down and talk for a while. He gave me some time to chat with him one-on-one. And then, of course, I was just dumbfounded and stunned when he sent, out of the blue, he sent me an email and said, I've got a ticket for you to the premiere. Wow. So, I was like, okay. I think my head was spinning a little bit. I had to sit down. He's a very, very nice person. And I think he understands that a lot of fans out there, and some are very serious about the work that he's done. He treats us seriously, too. He respects the stuff that we're doing. Issue 75, the last issue, both he and David Lynch gave us interviews, and we said we want to talk about Twin Peaks, and they were okay. We'll do it.
And to end it with David Lynch is pretty icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge surprise too. Again, though, and you guys know this, if someone's got something they want to promote, then you promote it for them, you help them, and then you say, hey, can we talk about this as well? And they're usually more than happy to like, yeah, sure, let's talk about some Twin Peaks as well. So that's what we did with Lynch. He had the Eraserhead DVD and website, and then and all that. And then he also wanted to talk about transcendental meditation quite a bit when we got to issue 75. He wanted to discuss that with us. And actually, lately, I've been pulling that issue out and reading that interview because I feel like some of what he was saying there informs what he was doing in the new show. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a valuable interview to get that stuff from him.
And thinking about issue 75, I remember reading it the first time thinking, oh, you guys are taking a break.
They really were.
They kind of were.
Right.
But it was clear that with the index that you put at the end, where basically you could go to there and say, okay, what issue has this interview? And then you clearly knew this was probably wrapping up for good, or at least you had the thought to at least put some work into the index and putting it all together.
Yeah. And it's bittersweet, really, because we knew it was the end, and we said, well, but you never know, maybe we'll come back. And if Craig had not passed away, we would be doing Wrapped in Plastic again. Yeah. I'm sure of it. We would have something. I don't know what it would be. It didn't turn out that way. It did turn out that Scott Ryan asked me if I wanted to come back and do magazine stuff again, and kind of convinced me to do that. So we've got the Blue Rose. And I love that there's a new magazine out. It's not Wrapped in Plastic. It's kind of its own thing, but it's in the spirit of Wrapped in Plastic. So we'll see how long that goes. I hope it goes for a while. We'll keep at it. I'm working on it right now. So,
well, thank you, Twin Peaks boys, for allowing the Blue Rose to get to talk a little bit about John Thorne and the 25th anniversary of Wrapped in Plastic. Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Ryan.
My name is Courtney Stallings, and I'm the associate editor of the Blue Rose magazine.
You know, I remember a couple years ago, I saw Carrie Fisher at an award show for George Lucas, and she was presenting him with a Lifetime Achievement Award, and she said she had a feeling that this was all she was going to be doing from now on, is just showing up and giving George Lucas awards. And that's sort of how I feel here. You know, when John gets more praise, who do they call but old Scott Ryan to come out and give more praise to John Thorne? I love it.
Well, Scott, we all know that John is the master, and John is so superior to you.
Of course. I mean, that's what we need. That's how it is. It's the great John Thorne, and maybe Scott and Courtney.
Maybe we're down there somewhere.
Yeah.
No, but we really want to honor John Thorne. I think Scott calls him the godfather of Twin Peaks.
And he loves that, by the way.
He and Craig Miller, ran the Wrapped in Plastic magazine for years and years, and we all enjoyed reading it. And now Scott and I get the honor and pleasure of reading his work before it's published, and it really is an honor.
Yeah, I mean, I said this recently about John, and it's just the truth. I learned more about writing from last October to today, working with John, than I did all the years before, about brevity, about perspective, about making sure that your opinion is not just thrown out there, but that it's based in fact. And his writing is different than everyone else's.
Yes, he thinks deeply, he writes deeply, he takes the time to ponder the issues. He never shoots down anyone's theory, but asks questions to make them think a little bit more about what they're claiming. He's a real intellectual, and he's a kind man.
Yeah, and very humble as well, which is why I think all these tributes to what he's done over the last 25 years is definitely something he deserves. And I think I've told this story 1 billion times on Twin Peaks Unwrapped, and I'll do it for 1,000,001. I pursued John since the day I met him in 2015 to bring the magazine back, and it took me from the summer of 2015 to the fall of 2016 of me continuously asking him, is now the time? Now it's not the time. Is now the time? Until finally it was the time. And I'm just so honored to be working with John and Courtney. They're both smarter than me, and what the country forgets right now is that's who you want to surround yourself with, the smartest and the best people.
That is absolutely correct, Scott. And we are smarter than you and better than you. And thank you for finally acknowledging it.
As you can see, we have so much fun in the Blue Rose magazine, and John is if he was here, he'd be just as zany. He loves this kind of zany talk. He's so happy I'm the one they ask when they need someone to talk about him. Believe me, I'd be his #1 pick, I swear. I just feel this is a monumental occasion, and I think back to when Johnny Carson was ending his series and how Bette Midler came on, and she sang that song sitting at Johnny's desk. And in that honor, and I guess sort of that vein, I thought, what would John want? And I thought John would want me to sing to him. So just imagine John sitting at the desk, and I'm just sitting up on the table, and I wrote this song last night, and I'd like to sing it all for you, if you wouldn't mind. And a 1, 2, 3.
Cut.
And I'm enjoying issue 3. I mean,
Me too.
It's great. I love the guide
awesome.
that you put together. There's a lot of insight, things that I missed. Like somehow I missed Lucy talking about time, and then at the end in part 17, time does stop. And so there's like little things like, wow, John, you really picked that up. Good night, John. And they also mentioned there was another one too, where part 8, that whole lore ball could be a tulpa, which. After you saying that, it's like, yeah, I bet you're right. I bet that might not even be the real Laura Palmer. I bet you that it makes so much sense now that we have these tulpas that do turn into these little golden orbs. That I bet you John is right here.
Well, I mean,
Laura
you know
was
what?
manufactured.
Yeah. That's interesting, and that I've been thinking about. I don't have any theory yet. Of course, any theory that ever I do come up with will just be that, simply a theory. I don't think anyone's ever going to solve it unless David Lynch were to come out and say, okay, this is what it means, and this is how it fits. But I have been giving a lot more thought to Laura's role in the whole story and the idea that Laura might not be Laura, and that the clues were there from the very beginning. And again, I don't know if this is what they meant, but when Cooper has the dream in episode 2, the little man says,
"She's my cousin, but doesn't she look almost exactly like Laura Palmer?"
But it is Laura Palmer. Are you Laura Palmer?
I feel like I know but sometimes my arms bend back.
and then that happens again in the return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then they use these clips from Fire Walk with Me, which are fascinating if you just think about them from a different perspective, where she's talking to James and she says,
"You don't even know me. There are things about me. Even Donna doesn't know me. Your Laura disappeared."
The Laura you knew disappeared. And I'm thinking, well, what if that's literal?
Wow.
What if she is not Laura, and all this time, the Laura who got killed maybe, or the Laura that Cooper tries to save is a tulpa. And that's why she disappeared. I don't know. I'm trying to connect these things, but I do think that there may be a door to open there. And so I thought, well, where could it have happened? Let's say that there. Well, so in Fire Walk with Me, she gets the painting, she hangs it on the wall, she has the dream, and then she sees herself in the doorway. Of course, we now kind of know more about that realm, whatever it is. In a way, did she save herself?
Wow.
I mean, one of the pages is missing.
Yeah.
And so, metaphorically, that's a Carrie page. Did Laura save herself? I want Laura to have some say in her destiny. So
Definitely.
Was Laura able to save herself by staying in the painting, and maybe that's where Carrie Page emerged from, and that the Laura that wakes up is now a tulpa? And did you see how I'm trying to put that together?
She almost traded places through the painting or so.
Yeah, and her hair,
exactly.
The connection with her hair in episode 2. Her hair is exactly the same like Carrie Page. She doesn't have the long Laura Palmer hair anymore, which is interesting. It's a small detail, but if
Scott Ryan built a whole case on that with
I know with Cooper's hair, but with Laura's, it's literally the same hairdo as Carrie Page, which is interesting. That why would you do that? Why would you not give the Laura Palmer hair? That we know, and we know, and then all of a sudden Carrie Page would have a different hair.
No, I think you're onto something. Laura screams a number of times. I keep calling it The Return, but now everyone's calling it Season 3, so I don't know what to call it anymore.
Season 3. We were told Sabrina got mad at us.
We can't get mad, but
no. Well, in the interview,
she corrected us.
I said in The Return, and she stopped me dead in my tracks and said, Season 3. It was a Showtime thing.
I'm going to call it Season 3 then. I was in the offices of Showtime. Ben was there. I don't know if you were there at the time, Ben.
I was there.
They said, do not call it Season 3.
Right.
We do not.
Yes.
We call it The Return. And I thought, okay,
but it seems like a marketing.
It was a marketing thing. Yeah. Sabrina said.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I thought that directive was coming from Lynch. I really did at the time. I thought,
he
doesn't want to call it Season 3.
They were going to call it Twin
Peaks. We were wrong.
And I do remember Mark Frost saying it was just Twin Peaks.
It's just Twin Peaks.
He didn't even say Season 3. I mean, I think it was on Twitter or something. He would say it's just Twin Peaks.
Okay, well, I'm going to call it Season 3.
Yeah.
And now the Blu-ray and DVD is calling it Season 3.
Real quick back to the Laura stuff. I mean, Laura screams. She screams in part 2 where she shows her face. All of that I think is really important. I've read some. I certainly haven't read all of the various theories that have been out there, but I don't know how many have really kind of tried to tackle what's going on with Laura in the story and what the meaning of that light behind her face is. She whispers something to Cooper, which startles him, and then she screams and she's sucked away somehow. And then it happens again that she screams when he's leading her through the woods. I think, right? Doesn't she scream?
Yep. Yeah. She's
once she disappears, all you hear is that scream.
Those disappearances and those screams and that whisper, I think all of that is critical to unlocking at least some of what happened in Part 18. And I don't have an answer right now, but I think that all of that was so important. And
I was thinking about that whole Laura whispering into Cooper's ear. Maybe she's saying something like, Judy is my mother. Something like that.
Yeah.
You know how my father killed me or something like that? It seems like Cole was saying that Cooper knows that Judy was this evil force.
Yeah.
And that he was actually part of his mission was to go to Twin Peaks in relation
Yes.
to this. I mean, it puts a whole new spin on things that he maybe knew more stuff. Why did he decide to take Carrie, Laura, to the Palmer house?
You're right. What Cole says does kind of redefine everything. And I think maybe that Lynch and Frost were trying to expand the boundaries of what Twin Peaks was so that it wasn't just this FBI going to investigate a murder and then it spun into something else. It was more, there was a backstory that bracketed it that we may not have been aware of then, but now we're getting that revelation that Cooper went to Twin Peaks. Really, he kind of knew he might disappear. He might know something more about Judy and its connection with Laura Palmer. So that's interesting. I've read some great stuff online. I think it's T. Kyle King just put something out on the 25 Years Later site where he thinks that maybe it was Laura's dream that Cooper went into at part 18. And I thought a little bit about that. I kind of like the idea that it's Laura's dream.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it might be someone else's dream, maybe it's Cooper's dream, or maybe it's not a dream at all, that everything else before that was a dream. And there's so many theories. And there's so many different ways to substantiate those theories. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but I do like the idea that maybe it was Laura's dream, and that I have to go back and listen again. But the very last moment, Carrie looks at the house and she hears Sarah Palmer yelling. Laura, I think it's Sarah Palmer.
Yeah,
sure it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone's been able to precisely identify whether that was Sarah Palmer calling to Laura Palmer in the pilot where she's trying to wake her up.
It sounds like
she's calling up the stairs and says, Laura, time for school, Laura.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, I really like the idea that maybe Laura's waking up at that moment. And it's possible that she wakes up and she was not killed.
Oh, my.
But then that opens up a lot of other worrisome issues. So if Laura was not killed and she wakes up that morning and she's waking up from this dream, then does that mean she still has to face, the terrible life that she has with Leland as essentially her oppressor and Bob still a force? Or was there something there that I can't piece together that means that she wakes up and her life is better? That I don't know.
Right. It's interesting.
So a lot of people are saying that Judy's being defeated in that moment, that Judy is in the house and she's been defeated, and I think there's some stretching that has to go on to make that case. I personally don't think Judy can be defeated. I think we reduce Judy when we say, Cooper had a plan to trap her. I think Judy is, to quote Albert, the evil that men do.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can ever erase Judy if Judy is that malevolent force that just exists in reality. I think all you can do is deny Judy. And I think that happened somehow when we see Sarah smashing the picture of Laura at the end of part 17, that Judy has been denied Laura. And if you even go back to Fire Walk with Me, the idea of what happened with Laura when she puts the ring on is that she's denying Bob and the little man what they wanted. Their prize was to possess Laura. And then she denies them. So I think there's some evidence that Lynch goes to the theme of, you can't have me. I'm going to resist the temptation, or I'm not going to fall into the trap. And that's the best we can do. So that's where I'm sitting right now in the way I approach it. I feel more comfortable with the idea that Judy cannot be destroyed. Even though Cole talks about this idea that Cooper and Philip Jeffries have been after Judy, I think it's a fool's errand, really. I don't think they can do it. No. So that's where I'm coming from right now as I try to analyze it.
Hey, guys, it's David Bushman. John Thorne, 25 years. Wow, I can't believe you started that magazine when you were just 10 years old. Okay, just kidding, John. But Wrapped in Plastic meant so much to me, all those amazing interviews, but mostly I just devoured those deconstructions of the mythology of Twin Peaks. They were so brilliant and so provocative, and I just couldn't get enough of it. God knows you and I have disagreed, hint, Dear Meadow Dream, but I like what you said. In Twin Peaks, there's no wrong or right. There's just mystery and exploration. Getting to know you has been a real joy. You are so generous with your time and your thoughts.
and I'm really lucky to call you a friend. I'm so happy that it is happening again, now with the Blue Rose magazine, which you founded with Scott Ryan, who will kill me if I don't mention the magazine and his name. Bye, guys. John, congratulations on 25 years.
After watching it the 3 times in a row that night,
Crazy.
That's where I kind of stood with that, John. I was kind of on the same page with this whole Cooper's in her playing field of subconscious or dreaming, and I was like, well, she is a dreamer. She's an ultimate dreamer because she's trying to escape a bad situation by pretending to be someone else. And I took it by that 3rd time that he was in this other level of consciousness that would allow him to coexist with her as someone else trying to escape. But I feel that evil is leaked into that world because, she shot her husband or somebody in that room,
We don't know for sure if she shot that person.
Yeah, but
we don't know.
Yeah.
And she has a really curious way of answering the door when Cooper's there. She goes, "Did you find him?" Which could be, "Did you find the guy who was just here and shot you?" I don't know.
It shows that there's this leaking of evil that's even going further into her mind. So, and then I always felt her face has this look on her face the entire time Agent Cooper is asking about, do you know who Laura Palmer is, to the family at the house. She has this look on her face, to me anyway, that just kind of says like she's worried. Like, almost like, oh my God, the jig is up.
Right.
Something's going to trigger and I'm going to wake up, or
I'm going to have to face maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to have to face reality. Will you stop? You're prying too much. And then when she hears, her mom yelling for her, she screams because I kind of took it as I got to go back to reality now. And she's trying to escape and she just can't. I don't know.
That's really interesting. Oh, no, I really, really do like that a lot. I like the idea that maybe Laura, when she dreamt in Firewalk with Me like we talked about earlier, or at some other point, Laura found a way to escape. And she went into this other world where she was able to live as Carrie Page. Again, I go back to the idea of the missing diary page, and I think to myself, Laura's the one who got rid of that diary page. It wasn't someone else. Laura is the one. No one could ever find it. So Laura was responsible in some, again, metaphoric way that Laura removed herself. And what if she is maybe in some ways trapped or lost in the dream, and Cooper's fixed the world for her maybe somehow, and now he needs to go back and bring her out of this dream, restore her to reality. I like that because both of them seem to be equally important in a way, that she escaped and then he went to go and say, look, I fixed things and now I have to, it's very hard for you to find your way back, but I can do it. I can get you back. So a lot of questions still to answer, but I do feel comfortable right now with that idea that maybe she was trapped in a dream state or another world and he was the one to bring her back. Now, that scream at the end just does not imply a happy ending, but Laura screamed and seems to have some powerful force behind it at other times.
Our show last week, we had Mark Givens on, and this came up, and I love that, Brian, you actually mentioned about the electricity of the house going out.
Yeah.
Like, she screams, and then the next thing that happens is there's, like, flash of the house. Like, and I thought it kind of bring that to the electricity, how Dougie Cooper woke up with electricity and stuff. So I thought that was an interesting connection.
I mean, everything goes out, so it's interesting, too. That's another...
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Kimmy Robertson.
You know, what's interesting about the Wrapped in Plastic is I have every single issue, as far as I know. But back then, everybody kept talking about this wrapped in plastic, wrapped in plastic, wrapped in plastic. And I was like, oh, my gosh. And they were sending them to me. So I finally opened one, and I went, oh, wow, I love this. I knew that they wanted me to do it, but it took like a year, I think, before I ever, or maybe 2. It was like forever before I ever got to do one. I mean, mine. And John waited and waited and was so patient and never got mad and never got cranky. Yeah, that's a magazine that's going to go in a space capsule or something and go out into space so that everybody knows how cool we were on Earth.
some of my favorite issues of Wrapped in Plastic magazine were the unseen Twin Peaks, where you guys dug into like finding these scripts and kind of saying, okay, here's what was on the page, the script, and here's what happened on the show. And those are my favorite because it kind of gives you more of a sense of what they were thinking about. And my only thing is like, I wonder if we'll be able to do that now because of the way the scripts were handed out and so secretive. If we'll ever get to see the return or season 3 scripts, I don't know.
It would be cool to see them.
It was really a whole different dynamic when the show was on ABC than it was when it was on Showtime. And the interesting thing about looking at the script is that they reveal a lot of how the show is being developed on a very fast schedule. They don't have time to really figure it all out necessarily. And you can tell that they scripted something one way and then they cut it. They either didn't shoot it or they cut it because they knew this is going to lead us down a path. We don't have time for that. Or this is going to close some doors to some plots and maybe we want to leave them open. And so it's fascinating to look at network TV scripts and the doorway that it opens to how the show was made and how the show was imagined by this team of writers. I don't think if we had the scripts to the new show, it would give us that same kind of information. I think the script was done. I really feel like Lynch and Frost had done this completed script, and then Lynch probably added material to it. And maybe we know for a fact that he actually at times was scripting on the spot. Something occurred to him. He thought it was a neat idea. And so he scripted on while they were shooting. And so I'm not even sure those may even exist that we would be able to look at. A final version. So it's a different dynamic. I mean, as a project that was really shot from beginning to end and edited from beginning to end, and it was a whole thing. When they're shooting episode 17 in the second season, they don't know really for sure how things are going to turn out in episode 25.
Sure.
So they're spinning plates, and it's kind of fascinating to see that in the script.
Yeah, and of course, then you have the David Lynch dynamics where
changes things.
Especially with episode 29, he comes in and he throws out half the script and just rewrites it. I mean, that was, I think, really interesting. As well.
Yeah.
See that? Really, David Lynch looked at this as a movie, and they really did film this as a movie. So they finished the script, and then I think they probably broke it up by location. Like if they're going to be filming all their stuff in this location, we're going to film it. But it's like, it is a very different from the old series and episodes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, a whole different approach, I think. Look, when Twin Peaks season 2 started, they had only shot through, I think, maybe the middle of, maybe not even that far, and they might have shot. I could go back, I have the dates, but they had no idea if they were even going to get renewed for a second part of the second season when they started shooting. So they don't know. They didn't know, and the scripts are interesting to look at. But when they did the return, season 3, they knew exactly, what they had to do to make it, to complete it. And when the show premiered on May 21st, it was complete all the way through to part 18. It was done. It was in the can. It was ready to go. There was no, possibility that it could change.
I almost wanted to ask Sabrina this, but I think that was the answer. When we talked to Sabrina, I almost wanted to ask her, just like, so did you guys ever go in there and change a part? Because you had 18, you didn't have 15 weeks to go in there and it's like, maybe I'll play around with part 18 or something like that. But I think the answer probably is they were done. They finished it and they handed it off to Showtime.
The only sequence I think that may have been added in later is the Monica Bellucci dream. And we heard that shooting was being done in Paris much later after we had heard that the series had wrapped, I think. And I think, as I recall, we were like, whoa, wait a minute, they're doing more? And if you go back and you watch that scene again, it's very interesting that Cole describes the dream to Albert, and he says all the lines of the dream. He says them all, and then we see them repeated again in the dream.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, when Lynch was shooting it, he was like, I'd love to shoot this dream, but I can't be sure I'm going to. So I'm going to make sure I convey every bit of dialogue from the dream in case we never get a chance to shoot that. And had they not been able to do that Monica Bellucci thing, then they still had Cole describing the dream exactly as it occurred. And then he had the chance to actually do it.
Yeah.
I think a couple of months later, he actually was able to make that happen.
Good point. Yeah.
That's just one little, there may have been other instances where they thought, well, maybe we can squeeze this in. But I think for the most part, they knew where they were headed and how they were going to wrap it up.
Hello, this is Diane calling from Brighton. It's me, Rosie, Bobsy.
Hello.
And Mark.
Hello there.
And we just wanted to drop in to join the tribute to John Thorne. Thank you so much for all your work over the years, John. He's been a lantern in the woods. He's kept the community going. I would say his work, keeping this fandom alive, is part of the reason why we got the return in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's the soul of the fandom.
And part of the reason that we got involved in doing this,
Absolutely.
The consistent quality of his work,
Yep.
to have such an articulate and eloquent and smart superfan, king fan, has literally kept Twin Peaks alive, I think. So, cheers.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. Enjoy the tributes.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Cheers.
So what was some of the favorite things that you enjoyed working on Wrapped in Plastic? Like, was there different parts of it that you like, hey, I loved the interviews, or I loved doing the essays?
Well, the interviews were great. I mean, really, the interviews were so much fun because here we are, writing about Twin Peaks, and then we had a chance to connect with somebody who was really there and who had some insight or had some story we'd never heard before. I mean, a lot of those interviews were done in the mid-'90s, and the actors we were speaking to and the writers we were speaking to were still very close to the show. As time goes by, with all of us, our memories fade, or we kind of remember it differently than maybe it happened. But some of those interviews back then, they were so close. I think there's an accuracy to much of what they had to say. And I remember we'd be talking to someone and they'd tell us a story about this or that, and we'd never heard it before. It was a brand new piece of Twin Peaks, and it was like, oh. I remember I'd finished the interview and I'd call my friend Nick, who was a huge Twin Peaks fan, and I go, we just talked with Richard Beamer and he told us this. It's just so amazing. Isn't this amazing? So that was fun. The essays were always the hardest part. Those were really, really tough, but probably the most rewarding feeling when they were done. It's like, hey, we got something pretty good.
Yeah. And we talked about deadline for the show, but like you guys were under a real deadline for this magazine. Every 2 months or so you were putting it out. How was that for you, both you and Craig, trying to get the magazine done every 2 months?
No. That was hard sometimes because Craig would call me up and he goes, we have nothing for the next issue. We have nothing. And we realized, and we had, we literally had 6 weeks to do it.
Wow.
Because it was 8 weeks total. It had to go to the printer 2 weeks before it would be out on the stands. So we had 8 weeks, but we had 6 weeks to actually make it. A lot of times we were lucky we'd have an interview banked. We'd have, okay, we got Grace Zabriskie. That's going to be the main thing in issue 35 or whatever it was. But we're still working on issue 34. So we can kind of relax a little because we've got the main piece. And then, of course, letters pages were great. We talked about letters pages. We get like a bunch of letters. You're like, okay, good. That's 4 pages right there. So we've got that. But I can remember many times Craig calling and saying, look, we've got to do something. And there would be times where we didn't know what we were going to do. We said, well, we don't have an interview and we don't have an essay. And so we got to come up with something. And we brainstorm. What are we going to do? Well, we didn't do Twin Peaks in Japan. We need to get into all that interesting stuff that we've got. We've got posters and games and, and Georgia Coffee. Let's do that. It was a lot of fun, but it really, truly was work. I mean, it really was.
And definitely this magazine has so much history. I mean, like, it really is. Like, if you want to know what Twin Peaks, this was the magazine. And, like, I think about those Georgia Coffee commercials. Only way I found out, like, the actors that played those characters was through your magazine. Like, I don't know how else to find that information. They're commercials. I mean, that's not an easy thing to look up and say, hey, who did this? Oh, I'd love to know more about this. And I go back to a certain issue, and you guys had it. You guys really did your homework.
Again, this was before the internet for a lot of it. I mean, the internet, the ability to get on and look stuff up was happening as we were making the magazine. We'd go to the library and look stuff up. I had access to SMU's media library, so I'd be able to pull out magazines from other countries and look up what they'd written about Twin Peaks. And I spent a lot of time in the library, sometimes just sort of treasure hunting, see what I could find. Life got easier when I could look stuff up on the internet. It really got a lot. I just sit there and I go, let's see, what's Chris Mulkey been in? I just type it in. Yeah, and we were lucky too. We get a lot of stuff in the mail. People would send us stuff. So for the Georgia Coffee commercials, I think probably through Catherine Colson, I'm guessing we probably got some sort of press kit information, or at least some documentation on how it was put together. And we had it. So we were able to put it in the magazine.
Cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I love that you guys had an ad. You had Bruce Phillips. He had his Twin Peaks collection. And like I would like order stuff all the time. His VHS tapes, like, oh, this is the Invitation to Love outtakes, and it was like all kinds of stuff. But it was because of your magazine that I could find Bruce Phillips and order all this hard to find stuff.
Yeah. Again, there was no way to just get on YouTube and look some of that up. Bruce just amassed all this stuff. He had all this. He was like a super fan, and he had connections. He had new people who had worked on the show, and he would put out a catalog, and we would get that catalog and look through what neat stuff did Bruce uncover.
I'm Perry Horton, author of Between Two Worlds, Perspectives on Twin Peaks, and I covered the return for One Perfect Shot in Film School Rejects. I discovered Wrapped in Plastic in the mid-90s when I was a college student and in the throes of my Lynchian obsession. This magazine didn't just make me into the Twin Peaks fan I am, it made me into the media critic I became. It taught me ways of thinking about film and television that went beyond and beneath the normal scope of criticism, and it imbued the series with even deeper mysteries than the ones shown on screen. The essays inside every issue taught me that the quest is always more intriguing than the solution, and that great series never really get canceled, they just pass into study. It was efforts like Wrapped in Plastic that kept Twin Peaks fever alive in the interim, and that fever is a large part of why we were able to get the return. Every Twin Peaks scholar, myself included, is just continuing the work Wrapped in Plastic started, and every Twin Peaks fan owes it a debt of gratitude for keeping the torch lit.
25 years later of I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, happy anniversary.
It was such a great time for me, like going from high school through college, and after having these magazines to every few months to get and see what's new with Twin Peaks or just things I had never thought of it. John, I was always so impressed the way your mind worked and how you put things together, and you came up with these very thoughtful, creative ideas that you did.
Yeah.
It was something else.
Well, thanks. I mean, again, it was a huge amount of fun, and we were just so into Twin Peaks, and we were pretty young, so it's like, we're doing this. Let's do it. And this is the month. October 14th is the actual day that Wrapped in Plastic 1 showed up in comic book stores. I guess primarily where it showed up. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna pull a bunch of stuff out of my files and put them up on the blog, and a few people might be interested. I'm interested because I never pull that stuff out, and curious things I found. I'm gonna do a few blog posts. So.
Can you mention the blog post so that people can check it out?
Yeah, oh sure. Get to it. It's abovethestore.blogspot.com. And I call the blog Above the Convenience Store. Cool. And there's a lot of old stuff on there too that I've written. I pulled a lot of material from Wrapped in Plastic, little things, and put them up again on the blog.
I mean, I'm so excited for you and for this amazing magazine after all these years. And people say it all the time, I'm sure to you, but like you through the wilderness, through those dark times when there was no Twin Peaks, there was Wrapped in Plastic. There was that, to cling on to, that when there was nothing else, it's like you could always rely on your guys' work.
It was a lot of fun to do. I'm glad, it was the success it was. It's got a tiny little footnote in the history of Twin Peaks, and that's good. I'm glad. That's good enough.
I don't believe it's a little footnote. I think it's a big part.
Footnote,
it's a big part. And I love that you, Craig, and you got to actually be recorded on videotape or whatever, film. And I think it's part of the Blu-ray, and it might be part
Blu-ray.
of the...
It's on everything, man.
Yeah.
It could have been better. It was better.
Yeah.
We had to redo it. It was much better. And it was, I think I've said this before, I'm repeating myself, but the interview we did with Mark Frost, for that DVD release that didn't, then eventually that, went on to the Blu-rays. But the full interview was an hour long. And we went into all kinds of detail, all kinds of interesting stuff about Twin Peaks. We really picked his brain.
Yeah.
And they used 10 minutes of it, and I think the rest of it is missing. I don't think we'll ever see it again.
I know.
That's a shame.
We need to reach out to somebody and say, hey, is it locked up somewhere in a vault?
It would make a great, a segment on a podcast, or you put it on YouTube or something.
I look. I don't think I think I signed away my rights to that when we did it. So whoever owns the rights to it, there may be someone. I'm sure it's in some library somewhere. Yeah. Look, it's not Craig and me that's of any value. It's Mark Frost. He spoke with us for a full hour, and we asked him a lot of questions. It was a real probing interview about Twin Peaks. You know, if someone out there can find that, and I don't care, you know, put it out on a podcast or, you know, put it up on YouTube. I mean, just his side of the conversation, you know, could go up on YouTube, and some good stuff that never saw the light of day. So.
And you mentioned you're working on Blue Rose magazine. How's that coming? Are you working on the second half of the guide?
Ooh.
Yes. I've not really started yet. I need to. Well, you know what? No, the answer is yes, because I've been sitting down and brainstorming and researching to write something of substance and value to people who are going to spend their money on this magazine. You know, really contemplating what happened in 17 and 18, and I want to write whatever I write will only be speculation and questions more than anything. But I don't want to just say, oh, you know, she screamed and that's the end. Right, I want to at least, you know, something. And so I've been looking at some of the Hindu texts that Lynch has referenced in other places and trying to make a few. I did find something interesting. I'll share it with you real quick. When in part 2, Cooper's going down the hallway in the Red Room, and the doppelganger of the arm kind of confronts him and says, non-existent. And do you remember that? It says non-existent. Okay. Yeah. And so I, until very recently, thought, okay, he's trying to erase Cooper, or he's trying to make him, he's trying to banish him. Well, in my studies of the some of the Hindu creation myths, I found out that the world, according to those sages, is divided into two realms. One is the existent, which is where we live, and the earth and the sky, and the non-existent, which is where the demons live, the underworld. Wow. And so I think what he was doing was he was banishing Cooper to the non-existent. He was opening the floor so that Cooper would fall into that nether realm. It's a tiny, tiny little bit of something. Now, what happened after, I don't know. Did he get rerouted to the glass box and saved? I kind of think he might have. So, you know, I found that little tidbit of information in this little bit of research. I'm not sure how much more I'll find, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in that Hindu mythology. There's, you know, these Vedas or poems where they talk about all kinds of interest. They talk about horses, and they talk about demons, and they talk about creatures taking the form of birds. I'm really not schooled in it. If somebody's listening who knows all this, they're probably rolling their eyes. I'm trying to understand it a little better so that I at least have that little bit of background when I look at the new Twin Peaks, because I think some of that Hindu writing influenced the way Lynch was at least depicting, if not actually plotting, the story.
Cooper drops and he's going to go to the glass box, but there's this whole like scattered lines or like scattered thing, and you see that same kind of sky image thing in the part 8 with the whole atomic bomb. You have this kind of I wonder, is like, that's interesting that you have that with Cooper going into the real world.
Lynch is somehow trying to convey this movement between worlds, you know, that there's some transferal of your soul or your physical body from one existence to another. And he kind of made it that ambiguous, starry field, but it is all blurry and stretched.
Maybe that is it. Because, I mean, it does seem like the atomic bomb was a portal. At least it opened up a portal for Bob to get evil to get out. Sabrina Sutherland, executive producer of Twin Peaks.
Well, I've met John. I really admire what he's done, and he certainly kept the fan base going and coming up with some real intelligent things to write, and I admire what he did with that, and that's a great magazine. Congratulations to John.
Well, this has been exciting, and I love looking at Wrapped in Plastic, the work, 75 issues you guys did over 15 years.
That's pretty amazing.
It is quite an incredible accomplishment. It's a great part of history. I know it's really hard to get these magazines now, so at least you can get the essential Wrapped in Plastic book by John.
Well worth it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for letting me have a little time to talk about Wrapped in Plastic. I know it's something from the past, but I thought this is the only time I'll really celebrate it, so why not? I'll let people know. So,
and really there's a lot of great history, and if you want to understand Twin Peaks more, I mean, these magazines really helped do that.
I was going through old files, and you'd find a little news item from something from like 1996, and it was interesting. It was interesting to see what the actors were doing, or you'd hear these rumors that Lynch was involved in maybe making a video game, and I think there was some truth to it. Didn't happen, but or something was going to get released on Laserdisc back then, and while it doesn't really mean anything now, you could kind of see the interest at that time in trying to pursue maybe something new from Lynch or from some of the actors. We mentioned a lot of stuff that just never came to pass, and nobody ever talks about it now. But there were a few interesting things that looked like they might happen, and they didn't. And we talked about them then.
Yeah.
And when we talked about them, we thought they were going to happen. So we were excited. I'm thinking in particular of this one game was going to be called Woodcutters from Fiery Ships. I don't know if anyone...
I've never heard of this.
No.
Yeah, no, Lynch was apparently involved, and they were going to make this thing, and there was supposed to be some Twin Peaks connection.
Wow.
So it never happened.
Isn't that crazy?
But we covered it in the magazine.
That's pretty cool.
I love it. I mean, I love that you guys dove so deep into everything, and we have this forever to go back to, and just your essays too, John. I loved your essays, both the Laura Palmer one and, of course, the Dream Theory one. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, that is a staple of history right there. I mean, that really is something to look back on and be proud of the work you've done. So, thank you, John.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John Thorne, and thank you to all the people who called in and left such amazing and heartfelt and sweet messages.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear from everybody.
I hope John enjoys this episode. It's kind of like a surprise for him, too.
Yeah, we were talking, last time we had him on the show, and afterwards he was saying, hey, the 25th anniversary of Wrapped in Plastic is coming up, the magazine there. And it's like, oh, yeah. And we were talking, it's like, we got to have a show and stuff. But it was really John who reminded me about that, and so cool that we were able to do a show on it.
It's so special, and I'm so happy. This is something that means a lot to you, Ben. I mean, like, before we started the podcast, you were talking about Wrapped in Plastic.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, the impetus of getting this podcast going.
Definitely. I get so inspired to do Twin Peaks work like this podcast because of Wrapped in Plastic, because they were there when there was nothing else. So I was so inspired. It does make me want to do this show, to see the work that Craig and John did. And, he is kind of a legend, really nice guy, John.
Yeah.
But he is so intelligent. He has these great creative ideas. Even getting to talk to him early on, it was like, wow, I'm talking to John Thorne.
I remember when we first interviewed him, before meeting him in person,
Yes.
I remember having him on the show. This is in the early, the first 20 episodes. John was in there, and we talked about his book. And I remember after we stopped recording, you were just so happy and excited. And I think we must have talked to John almost another hour after we stopped recording.
Yeah.
We talked to him almost the whole night.
It was crazy, and to me, he was like a celebrity. Like, he was almost, to me, as incredible as the actors and producers and directors and everybody else who made Twin Peaks. Because he was just so part of Twin Peaks history.
Yeah,
that, he was so special. And so we actually got to meet John in person when we went to the Great Southern Fest.
Stayed in the same hotel.
Yep. And so we got to hang out. We did an interview. We talked about Firewalk with Me. We did an interview with him on that. I think John could definitely tell how excited I was to talk
Yes.
with him. And I think at one point he says, Ben, I'm just a man.
Yes.
And I know he's just a man, but John is just an incredible guy. I mean, I think we've become friends with him.
Yes.
And I just want to hang out with him and talk with him. And we got to hang out with him a little bit at the fest. And
yeah, I mean, meeting for the first time at the Great Southern, we spent the whole day. We hung out with him. We talked. And then we get back to the hotel, and John's like, yeah, I'll come by, and you can interview me in the hotel. But in between that, I'm like, oh my God, John Thorne was in the car and I was driving. I was kind of nervous. I'm driving around John Thorne.
Don't kill him. You don't get an accident.
Yeah. And it was we were both kind of on cloud nine.
Yeah.
It was very exciting for us. And it was so cool because getting to meet him and hanging out with John pretty much the entire weekend, and then meeting the others as well, And it was just really cool.
Right.
Yeah, and he's become a friend of the podcast, and we can always count on him. Hey, John, want to come on the show? And he's very gracious with his time.
I always think he makes the show better. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think if you ever saw our numbers for this podcast, you would see when it comes to trending, what is trending? It's John Thorne shows. That part 8 that we had. He just has a lot of great things to say, and I think people are interested in what John says.
You read his book, if you haven't read it already.
The Essential Wrapped in Plastic.
Yeah, it's so good. I read that, and now you get to read more of his stuff with his blog, and now with the Blue Rose magazine. And if you can get your hands on Wrapped in Plastic, I say go for it.
Definitely.
It's pretty cool. Ben's got the whole collection, so you can always.
I'm not letting you. I'm not borrowing. Nobody can borrow my issues. Maybe Brian. Brian can borrow.
I've borrowed a couple. It could be like a library. You put a library card in the back, and you can send it out.
It's overdue.
Overdue.
He really should go down in history as a big part of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, keeping the mystery going. You can email us at twinpeaksunwrapped@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Twin Peaks Unwrapped. Please like us on Facebook. We're keeping the Facebook love going. It's going great. We're on Stitcher. We're on Google Play. We're on iTunes. Give us that 4-star review. Leave us a comment. It makes this podcast flourish and keeps us in the zeitgeist of Twin Peaks podcasts. And that's our show.
Well, not quite.
Hi, it's Mark Frost calling. I wanted to leave a quick message about John Thorne and his great work with Wrapped in Plastic over the years. I've said many times that John became really the keeper of the flame in keeping the dream of Twin Peaks alive, and we were so happy to get back together with John at the same time the show was coming back on the air. And thanks again for your continued support. Best to all, and again, best to John and his dedication to the show. Probably couldn't have done it without him.
See you.